Hi everybody, Nikki Liz here, and today I'm going to explain borderline personality disorder. What is it and what does it look like? A lot of you have messaged me and reached out and asking for me to explain borderline personality disorder, which I really appreciate because here I am. I'm going to do it for you right now. So if you've been following me for a while, then you see a lot of my videos and my posts are about narcissism, and that is because I specialize in working with people who have been victim to narcissistic abuse. And I use the word victim, but if you've been through it, I also use the word survivor because it is not an easy thing to get through. So the reason I often bring up borderline personality disorder in some of these talks and some of these little posts, and the reason is because borderline personality disorder is actually a type of narcissism. And that's where it gets a little bit confusing, I think. There are several different personality disorders, and one of them is actually called narcissistic personality disorder. However, all personality disorders are actually rooted in narcissism. But for some reason, that one is actually called narcissistic personality disorder, which makes it a little bit confusing. Borderline personality disorder, however, is rooted in narcissism. So someone who has borderline personality disorder is narcissistic. They have narcissistic qualities. And I want to start out by saying this. If you are somebody who has borderline personality disorder and you have been treated for it, or you are in the process of being treated for it and you're getting better and you're really working on your relationships with people, then I commend you. And this is in no way meant to speak ill of you or poorly of you if you're working on yourself. So I just want to put that out there. A lot of times, however, people with borderline personality disorder don't even know that they have the disorder. And part of the reason is because they are narcissistic and they don't see themselves as having a problem. A lot of times what happens is this is just part of the disorder in general, is that their thoughts and feelings, they tend to project on other people. And so they often see the other person as the problem. So they see their spouse as the problem. They see their children as the problem. They see their best friend as the problem. They see their sister as the problem. They don't see themselves as the problem. They actually create, their own mind creates a problem between them and another person. And they'll end up in an argument with that person or some kind of really dramatic falling out. And it can be very, very difficult for someone with borderline personality disorder to see that they had any responsibility in it at all. And oftentimes they will take no responsibility. They will blame it all on the other person. And so that is why I say it's rooted in narcissism, because it really is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between narcissistic personality disorder, which we can for short call NPD, and borderline personality disorder, BPD, just to make that distinction before I go into more depth about what borderline personality disorder is. So someone with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, the whole basis for the disorder is that they need attention all the time. They need attention, they need admiration from other people. And it's not really so much about the relationship with other people, it's more they just look wherever they can to get this, what they call narcissistic supply. So wherever they can get it from other people, wherever they can get attention, wherever they can get admiration, they'll take it. And that really feeds them and puffs them up. So if they can get that from someone walking down the street, they're fine with that. It doesn't need to be their spouse that they necessarily get it from. I mean, they'd like to get it from their spouse, don't get me wrong, but they can get it from a lot of different places. Someone with borderline personality disorder, however, they don't always need attention all the time from everybody. They actually don't. What they need is validation, and they need a ton of it, and they need so much of it that usually the other person in their life, and it's usually somebody significant, can't give them that validation because it's just not the way people normally interact. I mean, if you have a friend, two typical people without borderline personality disorder, the goal in the relationship is not always to validate your friend. That is not the goal in the relationship. But for someone with borderline personality disorder, they are always, and I mean always, seeking validation from the important people in their life. So that's the difference, that's the distinction. And someone with borderline personality disorder can have empathy. They definitely can have empathy. They can have empathy for their child if their child's crying and needs something. They can have empathy for, animals or like that are hurt. They can have empathy for sure. But what happens, and the narcissism piece occurs when the borderline doesn't get their needs met and they're not being fed that validation, that the empathy it can go away, and they may no longer have that empathy for the person that they once had it for. So borderlines tend to be just really up and down, really hot and cold, really black and white. And the reason why it's called borderline personality disorder, and actually this is something that I think is still controversial, the name. A lot of people don't like that it's called borderline personality disorder because it's kind of a confusing term. Why is it called borderline? Like, why that name? Like, why that word? Well, the reason originally was because it was thought that someone with borderline personality disorder was literally on the border between reality and psychosis, basically. So where they're kind of out of reality. And you'll actually find that someone with borderline personality disorder, they do have a bit of it. It's not psychosis. It's not psychotic behavior. It's not like someone with schizophrenia who might actually have delusions and totally think they're somebody else, or they may think that they are somewhere where they're not. It's not that kind of psychosis. But someone with borderline personality disorder, they kind of see things in a way that aren't real. And so that's why it's called borderline personality disorder, because they're in reality and they can see reality for what it's worth, but sometimes they experience things that aren't really happening. And what I mean is they perceive people's actions in a way that really that person doesn't mean those actions. So if you're late for dinner, they perceive that as a slight against them. And that in no way was a slight against them. It had nothing to do with them. The person was just late for dinner because traffic was bad or something like that. So then at that time they kind of dip their toe on the other side, the side that's not so real, I guess you could say. So that's why it's actually called that, if you wondered. And people with narcissistic personality disorder tend to be a turnoff. Like, people are kind of turned off by them because, especially if you're someone that's sort of in tune to people, you can tell that this person really just wants attention. It's really all about them all the time. They might be engaging in that they might be funny or kind of the life of the party, but once you really sit down one-on-one with someone with narcissistic personality disorder, there's kind of not a lot there. You can kind of just feel there's like an emptiness, and it's really just all about them, and it can get really exhausting talking about them all the time. So that's how it feels to be with someone with narcissistic personality disorder. Someone with borderline personality disorder, though, it doesn't feel that way with them. They actually can be quite engaging. They can talk about all kinds of things. They can actually talk about the things that you're interested in, and they might find that cool, or they might even really, like I said before, they have some empathy, so they might be able to listen to your story and be kind of interested in that. So they may have moments like that, especially in the very beginning of a relationship, or in a relationship where it's sort of a surface relationship, like a coworker or sort of an acquaintance. So you might experience them as nice, sweet, kind. So that's the difference there. The problem with borderline personality disorder happens when this person has a close relationship with somebody. So oftentimes there may be people, and I'm going to get to this in a second, like what it looks like, but I can guarantee you know somebody in your life with borderline personality disorder, because it's not that rare. About 2% of the population have it. So you definitely know somebody, and you may never know that they have this disorder, especially if it's maybe a distant cousin or someone you only see every once in a while, or like I said, a coworker. You may never know that they have this personality disorder because it really shows itself in their close relationships. So primarily with their close family, their children, their siblings, their parents, and their spouse or significant other. So, and that's what makes personality disorder different than any other kind of mental illness. Because depression, for example, if you're depressed because you're depressed. It's all about what's going on inside of you. And it may affect other people because maybe you're withdrawn or you're really not interested in going out, and it affects people in that way. But your depression doesn't feed off of the energy that you have with other people necessarily, whereas borderline personality disorder definitely does. Someone with borderline personality disorder, their symptoms really come out in the interactions that they have with somebody else. So borderlines, their behavior solely depends on how they feel the relationship is going. So I'm talking about either a romantic relationship, spouse, significant other, or a relationship with someone else who's very close in their life. Like I said, it could be a sibling, it could be a longtime friend, or a child. And so depending on how they feel the relationship is going, that makes or breaks how they behave in the relationship. So if someone with borderline personality disorder, I'm going to call it BPD just for short, if someone with BPD is in a relationship with their spouse and they're feeling like things are going great, especially in the beginning, when you first meet somebody, things are going great, you're going on dates and you're having all kinds of fun times and you're laughing and getting to know each other, they're happy. Things are great. You don't see any signs of borderline personality disorder. You don't see anything because things are going really well. But here's the problem. Eventually, things will not go well. Eventually, something will go wrong. And the reason is this. Someone with BPD, anybody with BPD, they have an intense fear of being abandoned. And I mean intense. Like the fear is deep. They are so fearful of being abandoned. They are just, their whole existence depends on this fear. And because this fear is so intense, they often imagine that you are doing something to kind of show them that you are out of there, that you're going to abandon them. So they often have these perceived feelings of abandonment. And this is why it gets kind of complicated and it's hard to understand sometimes because it's like, what? What does that even mean? Perceived fear of abandonment. So I'll explain. So they tend to have very unstable relationships with people because they are so fearful. They really believe that they themselves are bad inside. And they just know that if you get in a relationship with them, you are eventually going to leave them because you're going to learn how bad they are in the inside. Now, you don't know any of this. You don't know that this is going on inside of them because they don't verbalize it. They don't even really know it. It's really this internal subconscious thing that's going on. And so when you get into a relationship with somebody who has BPD, it starts out really well. And then all of a sudden, something will happen and they will perceive it as a slight against them. So here's an example. Let's say you guys make dinner plans, and dinner plans are for 7. You could be married to this person. This could be somebody you've known for a very long time. Dinner plans are at 7. You're going to meet your spouse for dinner at 7, and he calls you. You're the BPD person. He calls you and says, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. Traffic was terrible. I could not get out of work a minute early. I'm sorry. I'll be there, though, at 7:10. See you then. Something that benign and that normal and that not an issue to most people is huge to the person with BPD. To the person with BPD, this is not a small thing. You not canceled, you're late to dinner. So when you say to that person, I'm going to be 10 minutes late to dinner, what they hear is, you don't love me. What they hear is that you don't care enough to be on time to dinner. What they hear is that they're not good enough for you. And I know that sounds like so wild. Like, what? Like, we're talking about being 10 minutes late for dinner. But that little thing they perceive as a slight against them. They perceive that as like a little hint that you're abandoning them. And these kind of things happen all the time in their world. So they are constantly having little interactions with you that they perceive as a little bit of an abandonment. So let's use that example again. So you're 10 minutes late for dinner. You get to dinner, you sit down, oh, it was such a long day. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I was, that you're not going to believe this day I had. And they're just sitting there, and they're either giving you a silent treatment, they're giving you a bit of a cold shoulder, or they might just start yelling at you. And you're like, what? What'd I do? What's wrong? Is everything okay? And they say, no, everything's not okay. You were late for dinner, okay? Do you know how hard it was for me to get here on time today? I had to do this, and the other thing, and I was here on time, but you don't care enough to be on time for dinner. This is the kind of reaction you'll get from the BPD, the person with BPD. And you, as the person that was late, you're thinking, you may even say, honey, I'm really sorry. I mean, I couldn't help it. I had this meeting at 5 o'clock, and I couldn't get out early, and I got in the car the second I could, and the only reason why I was late is because there was this accident on the side of the road, and otherwise I would have been in time. I'm really sorry. And that's not good enough. That may be good enough. They might respond to that apology and be like, okay, fine, but it's going to be hard for them to give it up. Or they're going to turn that into, like, no, that's not good enough. And they may ruin the rest of the night. I mean, they may not talk to you the rest of the night. Dinner may be ruined because you were 10 minutes late, and they may not see that as a good enough excuse. And so what happens is you, as the other person, you think, okay, well, I didn't know it was that important to you. I'll try to make it up to you. So you try to make it up to them. And then they're happy for a while, and things are good for a while. But then something else happens. And next thing you know, they're mad at you again because you did something else to kind of like nudge that fear of abandonment. Now you don't know that this is what's happening. All you know is that for some reason your spouse is getting mad at you like all the time for all these random weird things that to you were harmless actions, like nothing. They meant nothing. But to the person with BPD, they mean the world. And so because the person with BPD is constantly having these thoughts that they're being abandoned or that the person is going to abandon them, any little thing that they see as a slight is going to turn into a huge issue. They are going to either give you the silent treatment, or they're going to scream at you and yell at you. It may turn into an argument that lasts till 2 a.m. They're going to tell everybody that will listen what a horrible husband you are because you were late to dinner. And you know what? Another thing, you're always late. You're always putting work first. You never put them first. All you ever care about is work. Work is so much more important to you than them. And they'll frame it in a way to somebody else. The other person will think, man, your husband doesn't sound very nice. And this is what they do. So some time will go on. You'll eventually make it up to her, and things will be decent again. And then something else will happen. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. It could be your anniversary, and maybe you made her the most amazing dinner. You got the kids out of the house for the anniversary. You planned your whole day around making her happy for this anniversary. You got the kids out of the house. You make her favorite meal. Everything's perfect. You order her flowers and send them to her work, and it's going to be a great night. And she comes home and you say, honey, I made you dinner, and it's your favorite dinner. Come sit down. Let's have dinner. And she sits down, and you can tell something's not quite right. And you say, honey, what's wrong? And she'll say, well, do you remember yesterday when we were leaving the grocery store? Yeah. You didn't hold the door open for me. Well, you're thinking, well, I had a whole, 5 bags of groceries in my hands. I didn't think of it. I'm sorry. No, you know what? You always do things like that. You're not sorry. And next thing you know, it turns into a huge argument. And the fact that you made her dinner, the fact that you planned this whole evening around her, it means nothing. Because you did one little thing that she perceived as a slight. And this is the pattern with borderlines. This is what they do. They have this unstable pattern with the people that are important in their life. They are constantly angry at somebody. Somebody. If it's not you, it's somebody else. And they're always complaining. They complain about their job. They complain about their friends, if they have any friends. A lot of times they really don't have friends. Or they have friends that kind of come and go. But they'll complain about you as the spouse to anybody that will listen. They will complain about their children. They will complain about their children to their children. So they will complain about one child to another child, and they often pit their children against each other. They're always complaining about something because nothing's ever good enough. And they have these really unstable relationships because they are just really never happy. And what happens is, if you're someone in a relationship with them, so if you're the child of the borderline, let's say, or if you are the spouse of the borderline, you don't know that this person has borderline personality disorder. You just think that they're sensitive. You think that they, these things can be fixed. So, okay, well, if I was late to dinner, I won't be late to dinner ever again. And then you're never late to dinner again, at least you try. Or if they get angry because you didn't hold the door open for them, you think, well, then I'll just make sure I hold the door open from now on. But what happens is, then it becomes something else. So let's say you're on time for dinner forever for the rest of your life, and you always hold doors open for them. That's great, but then they're going to find something else that they perceive as a slight against them, and then they're going to be angry at you for that. And then you try to fix that, and then there'll be something else that they perceive as a slight, and then you'll try to fix that. And it becomes so, the bar just keeps moving, and you never really know when they're going to be upset. And you start feeling like you're walking on eggshells. And this is very similar to someone who abuses substances, so abuses alcohol or drugs. And you'll hear this sometimes, or maybe you've experienced this in your own world, somebody who abuses alcohol, let's say, and they're nice and they're kind when they're not drinking, but once they're drunk, they're like another person, and you just never know which person you're going to get when you come home. It's very similar with the person with borderline personality disorder, although without the substances. They might have the substances on top of it. Someone could have borderline personality disorder and also abuse drugs or alcohol or something like that. But with this person, just the disorder itself, you never really know what you're going to get when you come home. You never really know who you're going to get on the other line when you give them a phone call. And this can create for a really uncomfortable relationship. And so what you learn as the spouse, and even more so if you're the child of the person with borderline personality disorder, what you learn is that if she's not happy, no one's happy. And so you try to make her happy all the time, and it becomes all about making her happy. And you kind of lose yourself in the process. And the reality is, as hard as you try to make her happy, you'll never make her happy. Never really, because there will always be something else, because this fear of abandonment does not go away. It's so deep, it's so ingrained. And so that's how it plays out. And it can be even more difficult when it's the child of the borderline, because the child's whole existence is based on pleasing the parent with borderline personality disorder. The child's whole existence is based on this. The child learns when they're growing up to do things to please. And I say mom, I say she, but it could be a guy too. Usually it's more often women that have borderline personality disorder than men, but it's men too. It's not just women. Just for the sake of the video, I'm using a female just to make it simple. So I'm not saying he and then she and then you're getting confused about who I'm talking about. So if it's mom, the kids learn that life is based around pleasing mom. And if we keep mom happy, then we're good. And if you are the child that can keep mom happy, then you're perceived as the good child. But if you're a kid that doesn't notice that your goal is supposed to be to please mom, then you'll probably be seen as the bad child. And these people with borderline personality disorder, they tend to be very, very black and white. And they see you as the person that they, I want to say love, but the person that is important to them. They see you as either all good or all bad. So if you're making them happy and you're making them feel validated, you're all good, you're great, you're wonderful. They'll say, oh my gosh, things are going so well in our relationship. Our marriage is wonderful, it's amazing if things are going well. But the second that little tiny thing happens to make things go bad, then you're all bad. You're not good anymore, you're all bad. And they do this to their children too. If the child is pleasing the parent and making them happy and doing everything that the parent needs, then the child is all good. But if the child is going off and, I don't know, let's say just growing up, becoming a teenager, getting into teenage things and wanting to hang out with his friends all the time, then suddenly the borderline sees that as a slight and will see the child as all bad. So when you're in a relationship with a borderline, you are either all good or all bad, depending on that person's mood at the time. And when I say all good or all bad, I mean you are either king of the hill or you're worse than the gum on their shoe. Like, there is no in between. And if you are king of the hill, they smile at you, they are happy with you, they will say you're the best husband in the world. But if you've done something wrong and you're the gum on their shoe, they will make the whole world know. Well, anybody that'll listen, they will make anybody who will listen know how bad it is, just exactly how bad you are to them. And they'll add to the story and tell things that aren't really true just to make it sound worse than it is. And it can be a real problem. So there's a lot more to the disorder than this. This is something that it's deep-seated, and it can play out in a lot of different ways. But this is the gist of it. And so how does someone like this get treated for this illness? Well, they can have treatment, of course. They can go to therapy, and it can be successful, especially if they do something called DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy. That shows to be pretty effective for people with borderline personality disorder. However, here's where it gets complicated. Because the person with BPD is narcissistic and doesn't see the problem as themselves, like, they don't see that they may not be able to admit to themselves that it was all in their head, that you didn't really come late for dinner on purpose. They may not be able to see that it was them that thought that. They truly think it was you. They truly, truly think it was you. So it's really hard for them to come to therapy and say, gosh, I have all these weird thoughts and I'm always mad at everybody, because they really, truly believe it is everybody else and it's not them. So that's what makes treating someone with borderline personality disorder difficult, and that's what makes it difficult for them to seek out treatment. Now, like I said, if you are someone that has this disorder and you have sought out treatment and you have owned that you have borderline personality disorder, I'm proud of you. I mean, I'm so incredibly proud of you, and your relationships are going to be so much better, and you're going to be so much happier if that's the case. And so I'm certainly not talking about you, but this tends to be the case with a lot of people. So that's how it plays out. So if you have questions, if you have comments, anything, please feel free to message me or comment below. And I'd be glad to answer any of that. If you have any suggestions for further videos that you'd like me to do, touch on something more specific that occurs with borderline personality disorder, or anything else that you can think of, any kind of narcissism or even anxiety or depression, I'd be glad to do that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful, and just have a great rest of your day. All right, take care. Bye-bye.